Good morning. My name is Joanne Wong, and I am Director of Corporate Services at the Greater New England Minority Supplier Development Council. Thank you so much for taking the time to participate in today's How to Do Business with Blue Cross Blue Shield of Massachusetts. So today we have Delana Urban Parker, Director of Budget and Supplier Diversity, who will talk about Blue Cross Blue Shield of Massachusetts Procurement and Supplier Diversity Program. So first, I just want to give a big shout out to Blue Cross Blue Shield of Massachusetts and Delana and her team. Thank you so much for being an annual official sponsor of G&E MSDC. Annual sponsorship is critical in helping with our MBE programming, and we wouldn't be able to do this work without you. So just a few housekeeping items before we go ahead and get started. We are recording this session. The presentation will be shared at the conclusion of the event, and we will have time for questions and answers. So we will call on you if you're able to raise your hand so you can ask your questions directly. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Delana.
Thank you, Joanne. My name is Delana Urban Parker. As Joanne said, I am the Director of Budget and Supplier Diversity at Blue Cross Blue Shield of Massachusetts. I am delighted to be here with you. Thank you for joining me today and learning about how to do business at Blue Cross. And as Joanne said, we are a proud sponsor of the G&E MSDC, and we partner with them regularly. And we'll talk about what that partnership looks like as we go through the slides. Joanne, you can go to the next slide, please. Today, I'd like to just cover, give you a glance of Blue Cross Blue Shield, and then give you an overview of our supplier diversity program and some of the work we do in supplier diversity. I also would like to talk to you about our procurement process, and then kind of wrap up by giving you some perspective about the downstream effect, the economic impact of our supplier diversity program. Next slide, please, Joanne. And so with that said, Blue Cross, for those of you who don't know, and hopefully all of you know who Blue Cross Blue Shield of Massachusetts is, but we are the largest health insurer in Massachusetts, and we have offices in Boston, Hingham, and Quincy. Boston is our headquarters. We serve almost 3 million members throughout the Commonwealth, and we have 3,000 plus 3,000 plus employees, associates that work at our offices. And that last bullet is very important. We've had a supplier diversity program in place for 20 plus years. So that gives you some perspective about how committed we are to supplier diversity and just having a diverse supply chain. Next slide, please. Next, I'll talk about our supplier diversity program, kind of the cornerstone of getting, of having representation in our supply chain. Next slide. So as I mentioned, we have had a supplier diversity program in place for 20 plus years. And the goal is to procure products and services from minority-owned, women-owned, LGBT-owned, veteran-owned, and disability-owned businesses. And we required a certification of these businesses. And the reason why we required a certification is because we are being asked more and more to report out our spending metrics. And so what the certification does, it really reinforces the integrity of the data that we're reporting and gives it credibility. And we just want to make sure it ensures that we're doing business with you know, who we're saying we're doing business with. And that's diverse businesses that are 51% owned, controlled, and operated by one of the categories that I mentioned: minority-owned, women-owned, LGBT-owned, veteran-owned, and disability-owned. On the right of this slide in the corner there is a list of the certifying entities that we work with, the different organizations. And as you see, the G&E MSDC is right at the top there. And we partner with them quite a bit to help us to find MBEs to meet our business needs. Next slide, please, Joanne. The next slide talks about our framework, our strategic framework. We have 3 pillars as part of our supplier diversity strategy. The first pillar is called procurement opportunities, and that's really where the heart of a lot of what we do is in terms of establishing contracts with MBEs. Obviously, our goal is to diversify our supply chain. And so to the extent that we can engage with MBEs to create a contracting opportunity, that's kind of where that pillar, the focus area of that pillar is. The next pillar is the supplier development pillar. In this, we feel that we take a holistic approach to supplier diversity. So if there isn't necessarily a contracting opportunity, we invest in the development and helping MBEs and other diverse suppliers to build their capacity. And what that looks like for us is that we have a mentoring program for women-owned businesses, whereby we have a team of Blue Cross Blue Shield executives meet regularly, monthly or bi-monthly, with a MBE or a WBE to help that entity build capacity. We also offer scholarships, and going back to what I said about the partnership with the GNE MSDC, we partner with them to offer scholarships to the GNE MSDC Advanced Leadership Program. We've sponsored quite a few MBEs to go through that program. And then that third bullet is we offer education and training, similar to this webinar about how to do business with Blue Cross Blue Shield. The third pillar is engagement, and the goal is really to create space for MBEs and other diverse businesses to meet us and meet other companies as well. We have participated in matchmaking events as well as hosted them so that we create space and opportunities for MBEs. We've also in the past partnered with the GNE MSDC to offer booth space at the business opportunity event when it was in person. This is probably pre-COVID, when we were meeting more frequently, and the business opportunity event was in person, and they had the different booths available. And so we've sponsored MBEs to be able to have booths and showcase their products and services to the participants of those conferences. Next slide, please. The next slide kind of talks about my role in supplier diversity at Blue Cross Blue Shield. My role, my team's role is to really serve as a connector, right? To connect MBEs like yourselves with the buyers at our company. And so this slide depicts that, right? And so how do we find the MBEs? And that would be on the left side of the slide, which is the supply side. We go to organizations like the GNE MSDC, and I'll call on Joanne and say, hey, do you know anyone who may be able to provide this product or service? And so Joanne always has a recommendation, or more than one recommendation, but she definitely has access to a listing of MBEs that can participate. And then, partnering with certified suppliers directly, right? So going back to those matchmaking events I mentioned, those are different opportunities to meet with suppliers directly and cultivate relationships with them. And so I may reach out directly and say, hey, I met you at a matchmaking event. We actually have a buying opportunity. And what I don't have on this slide, I do need a circle, is my network, right? I have peers in this space, peers at other companies, right? And I frequently reach out to them to ask if they have any recommendations for MBEs or diverse suppliers, or who are they using for whatever product and service that we're looking for. So that's how we find our suppliers. We also have a portal that we use. We encourage all suppliers to register in our portal, just because you cannot do business without being registered in the portal. And so that's another resource that we use to find diverse suppliers. And then the demand side, the buyer side. So that's the internal team where the opportunity lies, right? And so those opportunities, I'll get pinged from the procurement team, as well as the business leaders directly. And they'll come to me and say, Delana, we have a buying opportunity for XYZ service. Do you know of any vendors? The good thing is at Blue Cross Blue Shield is that, in most cases, 99.9% of the time, all roads lead back to me because we have policies in place that ensure diverse vendor representation and participation in buying opportunities. And so, the procurement teams and the business leaders will 99.9% of the time reach out to me. That 0.1%, I usually sometimes have to chase. And finally, on this slide, the diversity, equity, and inclusion circle, that bubble there, we are accountable. The Supply Diversity team is accountable to the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Council. And that council is chaired by our CEO, Andrew Dreyfus. And the role, one of the responsibilities of the council, the DEI council, is to set the goals for supplier diversity in terms of spending and objectives each year. And the goal of the council is, the role of the council is to make sure, that's embedded in our culture, in our culture, and that we are all working towards meeting our supplier diversity goals. Next slide, Joanne. Next, I will talk to you about our procurement process. Next slide, Joanne. These are some of the categories that we have sourced from MBEs. As you can see, the categories range, right? They range from event planning to IT. And there's transportation services and facilities management. And so, the opportunity, the sourcing opportunity kind of spans across all procurement categories. I will say our biggest diversity spend falls in the IT, the information technology area. In facilities management and transportation services, it's probably second in terms of our spending category. One of the vendors that we use for transportation services, I think I saw on the list of registrants, was DPV Transportation. So shout out to you if you are in the audience. I can't see any faces. So if you are there, thank you for being a partner with us. Next slide, please, Joanne. The next slide kind of gives high level what our vendor selection and contracting process looks like. So once you've gone through the RFP or the selection process, and we've determined that you have the capabilities, next is the contracting process. I will say the contracts are usually on our paper, meaning it's usually our contract that we're using to solidify the work. I will say for our contract, it is extensive, and you should probably consider, having legal representation because it is pretty extensive. The contract consists of legal requirements, and that's no different than other companies. I think how we differ in some cases is the IT security. Because Blue Cross Blue Shield handles member data, we want to ensure that there's no breach of that member data. Our IT security requirements are extensive. We want to make sure you have the IT requirements in place so that none of the data is breached. So we try to minimize that risk. You're always hearing in the news about different data breaches and so forth. And so that's why our IT security requirements are pretty extensive. We also have insurance requirements. Insurance requirements are, it's no different from other companies. I will say that, for smaller businesses, it can be a bit overwhelming. But I will also say, as an advocate for you, that, do try to negotiate in that space. And finally, when you are selected as a vendor and you perform work for us, there is a vendor evaluation process, a business review. And this is typically for our contracts that tend to be lengthier. We have a business review process where the business area, the business leader will evaluate each of the vendors and give feedback. And then we talk, supply diversity will also reach out to the MBEs and the diverse suppliers to find out their perspective as well. Next slide, please. Next, I just want to give you an overview of the economic impact of our supply diversity program. We know that there's a downstream effect. And so if we can go to the next slide, this pretty much captures that and what that looks like. So in 2020, we spent $43 million with diverse suppliers. And so that was up $7 million over the 2016 level. And for us, that was an accomplishment because in 2020, the year COVID pretty much unleashed on all of us, everything stopped in terms of the spending. We were no longer in our buildings and we were trying to figure out how this was going to work. So, in terms going back to those boxes I showed, the category boxes, we had really no facilities management services being performed. So that spending dropped off. We didn't have any transportation services. We had no shuttles going between buildings or anything like that. So that spending dropped off as well. And it wasn't just those categories, it was across all spending categories. So the fact that our spending was at 43 million, we were proud of that. That 43 million actually translated into about $82 million of economic activity across the nation, the broader economy. And then we also know that that $43 million that we spend with diverse suppliers supports 640 jobs nationwide. About a third of those jobs are actually in Massachusetts. And as a Massachusetts-based company, that is something that we're proud of, that we're supporting jobs kind of in our backyard. And so that kind of concludes the presentation. The next slide actually has my contact information on it. And Joanne's actually going to share this presentation as well. So my contact information will be in there. And I will just open it up for Q&A. I want to have a dialogue with you. So please, if there are any questions, let me know.
Great, thank you so much, Elena. So, as I mentioned, we have lots of time for Q&A. It would be wonderful if you could use the raise hand function. So we will call on you and, well, you can unmute yourself and you can ask a question directly. So let's see. I'll start with Gary Stifler.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Elena, I work with Joanne at the GNE.
Okay.
I was a former MBE. So I think for our audience, one question I had may be helpful. As you look at each year, and again, with the COVID last couple of years, it's been a challenge, as you mentioned, and losses in business. How do you look at it from a budget year as far as, do you look at specific spend areas that you don't have much diverse spend with that you try to increase in that budget? And how do you overall look at your budget year to year to, keep, hopefully growing that spend pool for the MBE side?
Thank you, Gary, for your question. So we look at it a couple of different ways. You're absolutely right. We set goals each year. And the spend goals are based on percentage of spend, as well as spending the dollar spend. And so we set those goals, and yes, we do look at different categories of spend to see if there's opportunity to increase that spend. But we try to, quite frankly, increase across all categories of spend. But there are definitely areas where I definitely see there's definitely more space for opportunity. This year in particular, we focused a lot on the marketing side of our business and in terms of the spend. And we had some meetings with several MBEs. El Planeta was one of them. I think, Joanne, you helped to facilitate that. And so there was some robust conversation with the marketing team. So we're hopeful that as we go into 2023, with the planning calendar, there may be opportunities with that vendor. But yes, Gary, so yeah, we look across all our spending categories and look to increase all of them. But yes, we definitely focus on those areas where there isn't necessarily robust spending.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Gary. And then next we will go to Nate Fisher.
Sorry, I had to click the button that said unmute. Good morning. How are you, Delina?
Good morning, Nate. How are you?
I'm doing fine. Hey, we met a couple times pre-pandemic, in person.
Pre-pan-
Yeah, that tells you how far back it goes. We were an IT staffing vendor that supported as a minority woman-owned business here in Massachusetts, locally here in Massachusetts, pre-pandemic, I guess, and also before you guys had kind of shrunk down the number of vendors that were here in your pool. I know we had talked beforehand. I just wanted to get an idea whether or not you guys were open to the concept of taking a look at that vendor pool, or what you guys' plans are in regards to IT staffing.
Sure. Can you refresh my memory, Nate? Which company are you with?
We're with Sigma Systems.
Okay, Sigma Systems. Yes.
Yeah.
Actually, during the pandemic, we decided to shift our model, and with respect to staffing resources. We used to have direct relationships with about 10 different vendors. And staffing vendors. And during the pandemic, we shifted to a MSP model.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah. And so now we are, I think, about 1.5 years into that relationship with the MSP. And there were several of the vendors that we had direct relationships with, particularly the diverse vendors, they were rolled into the MSP model. So, I'd be happy to talk with you further about if there's opportunity on the MSP side. I know that as being part of that MSP, I know that initially during the pandemic and post-pandemic, we decided to keep the relationships that we had, with the vendors that we had direct relationships, and keep them as part of the MSP just to minimize the disruption.
Right.
And so, but this may be an opportunity to go back and revisit that now that we're kind of 3 years, post-pandemic. I don't know if we're post, right? Because now they're talking about the numbers are going up again.
Well,
right?
now it's RSV and everything else. So, we're getting back to those hospital levels that we were at before. But no,
Right.
that's awesome, Dylan. I definitely will look forward to trying to take it offline and speak with me and the owner and yourself if possible. We had a direct relationship with you guys before you shrunk down. So we understand how we work and work with other Blue Crosses in similar situations across the country. So I'll definitely look to take that offline. Thank you for your time. So
yeah, no problem.
Okay, so next, Manoj.
Good morning, Delana. How are you?
Good morning, Manoj.
So we intend to become tier 2 vendor. So I wanted to know that how can you help us in that for contingent workforce services?
Which services? I'm sorry.
Contingent workforce.
contingent workforce.
Yeah.
Just like I just spoke with Nate, where we now have an MSP model, and we can talk more in depth offline about, the possibility. Like I said, we decided initially to keep the companies that we had the direct relationships with as part of the MSP, just for continuity
Yes.
and consistency. But 3 years in now, I can go back to the business leader to find out if there is an appetite to start introducing other companies into the MSP model. So we can certainly talk about that in more detail. And my contact information is, Joanne will share the presentation, so my contact information's in that, okay?
Yes, I do have your contact information, but I wanted to know that how can we become tier 2 vendor?
Tier 2 vendor. So we have a tier 2 program. I will be honest, we are just kind of ramping that up. We haven't necessarily, we've had some relationships where we have tier 2 spending, but not necessarily with all. We're trying to get it in contract language. So to the extent that contracts are expiring, we're starting to introduce that language into the contracts that are either renewed or new contracts that come. But it is a slow process because most of our contracts are multi-year. So we're waiting for them to become to expire, so that we have a little bit more negotiation power. As you can imagine, some of the non-diverse vendors, once you have the contract and you say, now I want to change it, it becomes, you lose some of that negotiating power and the ability to leverage. So, but we can talk about that again offline.
Okay, next we have Manju Nivatil.
Thank you, Joanne. Thanks, Delana, for the presentation. I'm from a company who specializes in IT staffing solutions. You had mentioned about to register in the portal. So could you provide an info about that? And thanks for the update on the MSP and the tier 2 vendorship, which I would be glad to reach out to you. But to begin with, the portal you mentioned, could you tell me where I could find that?
So I will send that information to Joanne, who can, do you mind, Joanne?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I will send the link. That's one thing I should include in the presentation is the link information. But yeah, I can send that after, okay?
Okay. Thank you.
No problem.
Okay, Hema Pita.
Hi, Hema. Hi, Hema.
I question portal, so kind of very much answered it.
Okay.
Thank you so much. So once we register, I'll get in touch with you for further.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, Stacy Chai.
Hi, Stacy.
Hi, good morning. Hi, Delana. Hi, Joanne. Thank you so much, Delana, for your presentation this morning. I just had a question. We're based in Boston. We are a technology firm. We've put a lot of focus in cloud engineering as well as data analytics. So I was just curious about the company's initiatives kind of moving forward into 2023 around digital transformation and technology. Would love to learn if there's any insight you can provide there.
I don't have any specific insight. I can tell you I haven't seen anything on the procurement plan related to those areas. So I don't know if there is any if there are any procurement opportunities coming up, because typically I have some insight into what's on the horizon, at least 6 months out. But that doesn't mean there isn't an opportunity. We are in the process company-wide of finalizing our budget. So there may be, it just may not be on the project plan yet, just because we're still determining what the 2023 budget will look like across the company. But like I've been telling everyone else, reach out to me and then I can reach out to the business leader to get more insight and maybe, connect you to
Okay.
at the very least. Yeah.
Sure, appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Okay, great.
And Eugene Green.
Hi,
Yes.
Eugene.
Hi, how you doing? Just wanted to say thank you for speaking to us today. Also wanted to speak to how great of an organization Blue Cross is. I worked there for about 5 years before I actually was a consultant, then got hired full time, and then when it changes to the IT department, my job got eliminated. But the beautiful
Oh.
thing, it got me back into my consulting, and I'm
Oh,
looking
nice.
forward to hopefully working with Blue Cross again. So I'm interested in more so in the mentorship opportunities. And then also Stephanie Brown, is she with the company still?
So Stephanie recently retired. She just retired this summer. So she's no longer, but I think she might have been in IT when you were here. She transitioned to the role of VP of talent acquisition, and she became the Chief Diversity Officer.
Right.
But yeah, she recently retired. So yeah, she's no longer with the company. In terms of mentorship opportunities, I'm happy to talk to you about that. Right now, we currently offer mentorships to women-owned businesses, but perhaps we can talk about sponsoring you to go through the GNE MSDC Advanced Leadership Program, right? Because that's something that we partner with Joanne and team. And I don't know if there are any changes to that program, but we can certainly talk about what that might look like for you.
Excellent. Should I just reach out to you?
Yes, and I'll reach out to Joanne.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay, Katrina Stevens.
Hi, good morning. Thank you both for the presentation and all the information. I just wanted to ask a bit more for a bit more information about the RFP opportunities. Is it typically just services? We're a medical and lab consumables, logistics and supply chain company, and we source and supply medical equipment and lab consumables for various companies. And so I wanted to know if there were, any sort of opportunities there and sort of what that looked like from your side.
I will say, so as an insurance company, we don't necessarily purchase medical equipment. So there's not, an opportunity at Blue Cross for that. In terms of healthcare, you may want to consider like the hospitals, like Mass General, Brigham. I think that's what they're called now. They've changed their name several times, but they, you know what I mean? So from a health insurance, we don't typically purchase medical equipment. So yeah, there wouldn't be any RFP opportunities for that type of product.
Thank you.
Okay, so we did have some questions that came in through the Q&A box. So let's see. The first one is, when you mentioned insurance requirements are necessary, can you elaborate on what that means?
Sure. So just like every company, as part of their contracting process, they'll have insurance requirements. They want you to have some insurance, right, for liability purposes. So if something happens, you have some kind of liability insurance. I don't have the specific the specific terms, in terms of the dollar amounts, but yeah, most companies that of the size of Blue Cross Blue Shield will require that you have some kind of insurance for your business.
Thank you. Okay, second question is, how do we know when opportunities will become available, and what is the application process for these opportunities?
So we, unfortunately, we do not publish our opportunities because sometimes they come up, all of a sudden. And so we don't necessarily publish our opportunities like on our website. I know there are some companies that do that. We do not. Part of knowing what's coming up is reaching out to me. Reaching out to me directly and just kind of cultivating that relationship to find out what's on the horizon.
Thank you. And then As of right now, the last question in the Q&A box. So if there are other questions, please raise your hand or put them in the Q&A box. But this question is, can you please share some of the job roles you procure from staffing vendors?
It can range. So at Blue Cross Blue Shield, we have different call centers, you know, like member service. So like when you call your health insurance company and you want to find out about your benefits, it's usually a call center to perform in that function. So we have staffing opportunities for that. We have a health, like a health and wellness or a health and medical management related call center where it's more clinical support, like nurses. So we have a call center for that. We also may source for IT resources as well. So it kind of ranges across the board. If you can think about, you know, how a company operates and what they do, you know, those are some of the areas at Blue Cross that we have that we source for.
Thank you. All right, one more question has come in. What services do you look for under the consulting box?
Different consulting. So sometimes we have engagements to kind of process improvement, you know, looking for efficiencies throughout the company. And so we may engage a consultant for that. Sometimes streamlining a process, right? So yeah, the consulting is a broad category. You know, you can hire consultants for, you know, to transition, you know, in terms of transitioning different departments and so forth. And we hire for that as well. So yeah, the consulting category is pretty broad.
Okay, so that seems to be it for all the questions. If there are any last minute ones, raise your hand, throw it in the Q&A box. Otherwise, I just want to say thank you so much, Delana, for all of your help and your support in promoting minority-owned businesses, and also for yours and Blue Cross Blue Shield of Massachusetts support of G&E MSDC. Oh, another question came in.
Oh,
all right. Are you looking for healthcare analytics companies to partner with?
Right now, there's an opportunity on the horizon, but that's not to say there won't be something in the future. So, you know, definitely reach out to me to you know, inform me about your business and what your capabilities are, or send me your capability statement. You have my email address, and so yeah, send me your capability statement, or ping me.
Wonderful. Okay, so again, thank you. The presentation will be shared, and I will be sharing the vendor portal information as well as the presentation with Delana's contact information. So thank you so much for your time today, Delana, and thank you to everyone.
You.
Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, everyone.